It happened in the middle of our Christmas dinner, right when everyone was relaxed and feeling warm from the wine. My son-in-law suddenly stood up and announced, loud and confident, "Let us all take a moment to appreciate my father-in-law, a penniless old man who does not even deserve a holiday like this." The table erupted with laughter. People assumed it was some kind of tasteless joke. I did not laugh. I rose from my chair, calmly pulled out a document, and made it clear that the 1/9 inheritance he thought was guaranteed would never be his now. The color drained from his face instantly. Conversations died mid-breath. Forks froze in the air. That betrayal crossed a line, and I knew, with absolute certainty, it would not go unanswered. The consequences would be severe. The champagne flute in Kyle Mercer's hand caught the sparkle of the crystal chandelier as he stood at my dining table. In that quiet, instinctive way you recognize danger before it fully arrives, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks, I knew something ugly was coming. "A toast," Kyle announced, his voice polished with that practiced mix of charm and entitlement he had perfected during his 8 years of marriage to my daughter. 14 guests turned toward him, faces glowing from holiday cheer and expensive alcohol. I had spent $112 on that Christmas Eve meal, herb-crusted prime rib, imported champagne, and handmade decorations I had worked on for 3 straight days filled the house at 1009 Fort on Willow Crest Lane. Kyle smiled wider, a sharp smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "I want to thank my father-in-law, Richard Hale, for hosting us tonight in this lovely home." He swept his hand dramatically across the living room. Several people nodded, impressed. "But," he continued, pausing for effect, "I should probably clear something up for those who do not know the whole story." My grip tightened around my glass. Across the table, my daughter, Emily, stared intensely at her plate, as if the pattern in the china demanded her full attention. "My father-in-law here," Kyle said, laying on fake sympathy, "is what you might call a broke old man who does not really deserve a celebration like this." He chuckled softly. "Good thing we are kind enough to let him stay in what is basically our house now." The laughter exploded instantly, loud, careless, merciless. I watched their faces carefully. Kyle's co-worker from the Ford dealership, his poker buddies, Emily's friends from her upscale fitness club. They loved it. One woman laughed so hard she had to dab tears from her eyes. "Kyle," I said quietly, but my voice vanished beneath the noise. He kept going, feeding off the attention. "Honestly, Richard, you should be grateful we tolerate you. What would you even do without us? Sit in your dusty garage, messing around with ancient car parts?" More laughter followed. Someone even tapped their glass in approval. I looked directly at Emily then, really looked at her. She was no longer the little girl who used to perch on a stool in my repair shop, smelling like motor oil, asking endless questions about engines and spark plugs. Now she wore a $400 necklace I did not remember buying, and she could not bring herself to meet my eyes. She simply lifted her wine glass and stared somewhere past my shoulder. That was the moment something inside me shut down. Not rage, something colder, sharper, the kind of emotional freeze that comes from 45 years of running a business and learning exactly how some people smile while quietly taking everything from you. I had built Hale Automotive Services from a single bay behind my first house into 6 locations across Arizona. I sold the company in late 2022 for just over $2 million. Not bad for a kid who started out swapping oil in his uncle's driveway. I believed that money would protect my daughter's future. I believed it would give her stability. Instead, it had apparently turned me into the evening's entertainment. "You know what is really funny," Kyle said, fully committed now. "Richard actually thinks he is being generous by letting us live here, like he is doing us a favor. Meanwhile, that is enough." I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor, slicing through the laughter like a knife. Silence fell. Not a peaceful silence, an awkward, uneasy one. Kyle's grin twitched, but did not disappear. "Come on, Richard. Can you not take a joke?" Every eye in the room was on me. I felt their curiosity, their pity, their amusement pressing in. I was 68 years old. I had survived the collapse of a business partnership, a failed marriage, and decades of careful planning, and this was my reward. Being mocked in my own home by a man who had never built anything in his life beyond excuses. "Excuse me," I said evenly, setting my glass down with deliberate care. "I need some air." I walked through the kitchen, past the catered dishes I had ordered specially from a restaurant in downtown Tempe, past the custom holiday cake that cost me $190. Behind me, Kyle's voice dropped, likely explaining to the group that the old man was overly sensitive and could not handle the truth. The garage door shut behind me with a firm click. That space was my refuge, the place where I had spent the last 4 years restoring a 1956 Chevrolet Bel Air. Piece by piece, the car sat there patiently, half-assembled, chrome catching the fluorescent light, waiting. I leaned against my workbench, placing my hands flat on the cold steel. Laughter drifted faintly through the walls, muted but unmistakable. You spend your entire life building something. You sacrifice sleep, comfort, and peace. You convince yourself you are creating security for the people you love. And then one day, you realize they are not planning a future with you at all. They are planning a future without you. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking application. $863,000 in liquid assets. Nearly $500,000 more spread across home equity, bonds, and investment accounts. A portfolio that took decades of discipline to build and only one careless generation to ruin. Kyle thought I was broke. He thought I was weak. He thought this house belonged to him now. I looked over at the Chevrolet, unfinished, worn but full of potential. In some ways, it reminded me of myself. The difference was simple. I knew exactly how to fix a car. I knew which parts needed replacing, which systems required a full rebuild, and which components were too far gone to save. People are not all that different from engines, at least not when you have spent your life understanding how systems work. Apply pressure in the right places, ease off at the right moment, and things either start running smoothly or shut down completely. Inside the house, the laughter continued, muffled by the walls. I stayed in the garage, standing still, thinking carefully. 45 years of running companies, negotiating contracts, and protecting assets does not vanish just because you retire. You do not forget how to read intentions, how to spot patterns, or how to defend what belongs to you. By the time I decided to walk back into that house, I knew exactly what I was going to do. And Kyle Mercer had absolutely no idea what was coming. I stayed in the garage another 10 minutes, letting the cold December air steady my breathing and cool my thoughts. The sounds of the party drifted through the door, glasses clinking, laughter rising and falling. My own home had turned into a stage for my public humiliation. My mind drifted backward, replaying the moments when everything quietly went wrong. 3 years earlier, Emily and Kyle had shown up at my door wearing those carefully practiced smiles. "Dad, we need to talk about your living situation," Emily had said gently. "This house is so big, and you are all alone. What if something happens to you?" I made coffee and listened while Kyle explained how they could move in, help out, keep me company. "Just for a little while," Emily had added quickly, "until you get back on your feet." That was my first mistake. I failed to recognize a con disguised as family concern. 6 months later came the second mistake. Emily asked if she could use my credit card for groceries. She said it would be easier than juggling multiple cards and reimbursing me later. I handed it over without hesitation. I trusted her. Later, standing alone in the garage, I walked over to my filing cabinet and pulled out the folder I had reviewed more than once. $8,200 charged in 3 months, high-end restaurants, online luxury purchases, a deep-sea fishing trip to Cabo San Lucas, one I had definitely not taken. The statements told a very different story than the one Emily had been feeding me. I thought back to Kyle 8 years earlier. He had been charming then, maybe a little too polished, but Emily had been happy. I remembered watching him propose to her right there at my auto shop, talking about honoring my life's work and respecting the man who built it. I had been genuinely moved. The wedding cost me $36,000. I paid it gladly. When did that charm rot into contempt? 18 months earlier, I had casually mentioned selling the house and moving into a smaller place closer to downtown Flagstaff. Kyle's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Emily's face drained of color. They exchanged a quick, panicked glance before Kyle recovered and smiled. "Do not be ridiculous, Richard," he had said lightly. "This house is perfect. Besides, where would we go? We have built our life here. Their life in my house, on my money." After that, I started noticing things. The way Kyle referred to it as our house. How he claimed the master closet, quietly moving my clothes into the guest room. The way they repainted walls, replaced furniture, and made decisions without asking, like ownership was already assumed. The garage door creaked open. Emily stood there, framed by the warm kitchen light, her expression uncertain. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked softly. I studied her face, searching for the little girl who once handed me wrenches and believed I could fix anything. "I am fine, sweetheart," I said calmly. "I just needed a moment." "Kyle did not mean it like that," she started. "Yes, he did," I replied evenly. There was no anger in my voice, only certainty. "He meant every word." Her hands twisted together. For a brief moment I thought she might finally say something honest. Instead, she sighed. "You are being too sensitive. It was just a joke," she said. "Come back inside. Enjoy your party." She hesitated, then turned and walked away. I looked around my garage at 5 decades of tools collected one piece at a time, at the Chevrolet I had spent 3 years restoring, at the concrete floor stained by a lifetime of work. A man spends his life building things, and sometimes, before he can build again, he has to tear down what is broken. I walked to my tool chest and opened the bottom drawer. Beneath oily shop rags sat a manila folder. Inside were trust documents. $1 million, set aside for Emily and Kyle. Everything I had worked for. I pulled the folder out and held it for a moment. Then I walked back into the dining room where 14 guests were finishing dessert. Kyle noticed me immediately. His smile was smug, confident. He thought he had won. I placed the folder on the table. "Kyle," I said, my voice steady, as the room fell silent. "You are absolutely right." His smile grew wider. "I am a broke old man," I continued. I opened the folder and removed the papers. Official seals, signatures, dated October 18th, 2025. "This is a trust deed for $1 million, I said clearly, holding it up. "It was created to transfer to you and Emily after my death. Your inheritance." Kyle's expression shifted. Confusion, then recognition, then pure terror. "Was," I said calmly. Past tense. I tore the documents in half. The sound echoed through the room. I tore them again and again. I let the pieces fall onto the table like snow. "You are right about one thing," I said. "I am broke now, because this will never touch a bank again." Someone gasped. I watched the color drain from Kyle's face. I watched his mouth open and close without sound. I watched my daughter's expression collapse. "Merry Christmas," I said simply. Then I walked out, through the kitchen and back into my garage. This time, I locked the door behind me. I sat inside my half-restored Chevrolet, my hands resting on the disconnected steering wheel. Through the walls, chaos erupted. Raised voices, Kyle shouting, chairs scraping, the front door slamming as guests rushed out. I sat alone in the quiet darkness and felt something I had not felt in 3 years. Free. They thought I was weak. They thought I was foolish. They thought I was ready to be managed until I died and handed them everything. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. I found Daniel Price, my estate attorney. We had an appointment scheduled for January 4th. I moved it up to December 29th. Then I called Evan Brooks, a private investigator I had used years earlier for corporate background checks. He was thorough, discreet, and expensive. "Evan," I said when he answered, "this is Richard Hale. I need you to look into my son-in-law, Kyle Mercer, everything, his finances, employment history, and digital footprint." "I need to know exactly who I am dealing with," I said into the phone. When Evan Brooks quoted his fee, $3,500 for a comprehensive report delivered within 2 weeks, I did not hesitate. It would have been a bargain at twice that price. I agreed immediately and ended the call. I sat there in the garage afterward, listening as my house slowly settled into silence. The party was over. The guests were gone, somewhere upstairs. Emily and Kyle were either arguing or quietly panicking. I did not care which one it was. Tomorrow would be Christmas morning. The air in that house would be thick with unspoken accusations and forced politeness. Kyle would try to fix this. He always did. He would smile, deflect, apologize just enough to soften the moment. And I would let him believe it might work, right up until the second I dismantled everything he had built. The Chevrolet surrounded me, patient and unfinished. I ran my hand along the dashboard, feeling where the vinyl had cracked with age. "You and me both," I murmured quietly. "Time for a full restoration." But restoration always starts the same way, careful disassembly. You do not rebuild anything properly until you take it apart, inspect every damaged component, expose every weakness, and identify every flaw. I had spent my entire life taking things apart and putting them back together better than before. And now I was about to teach Kyle Mercer Exactly how thoroughly a methodical man could dismantle a life built on lies. The shop light hummed overhead. My tools waited neatly on the pegboard, each one exactly where it belonged. It was time to get to work. Christmas morning arrived with the eerie stillness that follows a natural disaster. I made coffee in my kitchen, listening to muffled voices upstairs, Emily's voice tight and shaky, Kyle's low and angry. I poured my coffee and carried it straight to the garage, leaving them to stew. The Chevrolet looked different that morning, or maybe I was seeing it differently. Beneath the primer, it had once been a rusted wreck. Now it was halfway to something beautiful. That was the lesson. Restoration requires patience. You strip everything down. You fix what can be fixed. You replace what cannot be saved. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. More than one set. The garage door opened. Kyle looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His face was drawn, his confidence cracked. Emily stood slightly behind him, her eyes red and swollen. She had been crying. For a brief moment, the older part of me wanted to comfort her. The newer, colder part noticed how she positioned herself behind her husband, still choosing him first. "Richard?" Kyle said carefully, his voice slipping into that practiced salesman tone he used when a deal was falling apart. "Can we talk?" "We are talking," I replied calmly. "About last night," he continued quickly. "I had too much to drink. The guys were pushing me. I did not mean any of it." I took a slow sip of coffee and watched him without responding. The silence unsettled him. "Come on," he pressed. "It was a joke. You know I respect you." "Do you?" I asked, turning my eyes to Emily. "Do we, Emily?" She nodded too fast. "Dad, please, can we just forget it happened? Start fresh?" I looked at her closely. When had she learned to lie with such ease? "The trust documents are already filed," Kyle added quickly. "You cannot just—" "Those were copies," I interrupted, "for your records only. The originals are with my attorney. I instructed him this morning to void the entire arrangement." It was a lie. My attorney's office was closed until the 27th. But Kyle did not know that. "You cannot do that," he said sharply. "Actually," I replied evenly, "under Arizona law, I can do whatever I choose with my estate." Emily's eyes widened. She had clearly been thinking of my assets as already half hers. "We are family," she said softly. "Family forgives." "You are right," I said. "Family should also respect one another, support one another, and be honest." I held her gaze. "When was the last time you were honest with me?" She flinched. "The credit card you have been using for groceries," I continued calmly. "Funny thing about statements, they are very detailed. Restaurant charges, online shopping, a weekend trip to Cabo San Lucas in October." Kyle went completely still. "I do not recall authorizing a vacation," I added, "or $800 at poker tables in Louisiana." The garage fell silent, except for the low hum of the heater. "I notice everything," I said quietly. "I always have. I just chose not to see it." Emily started crying again. This time, the tears might have been real. "We will pay you back," Kyle said, his jaw tight. "Every cent." "I am sure," I replied. "You must have plenty of savings." His expression told me everything I needed to know about their finances. "I have an appointment with my attorney on the 27th, I said. "Until then, I think we all need space." I walked past them and into the house. Behind me, Emily broke down completely. The garage door slammed shut. I went straight to my study and opened my laptop. Now it was time to look at the numbers. 3 hours later, I had a complete breakdown. $8,247 in just 3 months. When I reviewed earlier statements, a pattern became obvious. They had started small, careful, testing boundaries. Then they got bolder. The Cabo trip alone cost $2,400, 4 nights at a resort, fishing excursions, spa treatments, all charged to my card while they lived rent-free in my house. This was not confusion. This was not miscommunication. This was theft, calculated, ongoing. My phone buzzed. "Emily, please, Dad, can we talk?" I deleted the message. Another buzz. "Kyle, you are making a huge mistake." I blocked his number. 2 days until my attorney appointment. 2 days to gather everything I needed. I opened a new browser tab. Financial Investigators, Arizona, Fraud and Asset Tracing. Brooks and Associates, Financial Investigations. I already had Evan on the case. Now I wanted more. I picked up the phone and dialed. "Brooks and Associates," a voice answered. "Evan," I said calmly, "it is Richard Hale. I want to expand the scope, dig deeper." "I need a complete financial breakdown on someone," I said. There was a brief pause on the line. "Domestic situation?" "My son-in-law." Another pause, longer this time. "Timeline?" 2 weeks, I replied. "Money is not an issue." "A comprehensive report runs $3,500, he said. "That includes credit checks, public records, employment verification, and financial exposure." "Perfect," I said. "When can you start?" "I can begin as soon as I receive his information." I already had everything. Emily had listed him as a reference on insurance paperwork the previous year. "I will email everything within the hour," I said. "One condition, absolute discretion. He cannot know he is being investigated." "That is standard procedure, Mr. Hale," he replied. "You will have preliminary findings in 1 week and the full report within 2. We finalized the details and ended the call. I sat down at my desk and began compiling Kyle's information. His Social Security number from the insurance forms, his date of birth from the wedding invitation I had saved, his current employment listed as the Toyota dealership across town. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. The pieces were moving now. The machinery was engaged. In business, the most effective revenge is never emotional. It is systematic. Identify the problem, collect data, build a strategy, execute precisely. Kyle believed he was dealing with a broken, aging man. He had no idea he had just stepped into a trap forged by 45 years of experience. December 27th arrived cold and clear. I drove downtown to my attorney's office, located on the 15th floor of a glass tower on a busy avenue, the kind of firm that charged $450 an hour and justified every minute of it. Daniel Price walked into the conference room carrying a leather portfolio. He was in his early 50s, silver at the temples, eyes sharp and alert. "Richard," he said dryly, "sounds like you had quite a Christmas." We sat. He opened his folder. "First question," he said, "are you serious about disinheriting your daughter?" "Completely," I replied. "Even if she divorces Kyle?" I paused, considering the question carefully. "Can the documents be structured with conditions?" "Absolutely," he said. "She receives nothing while married to him. If she divorces him and meets specific criteria, she becomes eligible." "What kind of criteria?" "Employment requirements, financial responsibility benchmarks, time-based vesting, whatever parameters you want." That felt right. A door left unlocked. but only if she chose to walk through it. "And the house?" I asked. "You own it outright," Daniel said. "You can do whatever you want with it." "Can I evict them?" His expression tightened slightly. "They have established residency. You would need to follow proper legal procedures, serve notice, file with the court. 30 to 60 days minimum, end of January at the earliest." That was fine. I could wait. "The credit card charges," I said. "Unauthorized personal spending." "Explain the arrangement," he said. I did. Verbal permission for household expenses that slowly escalated into luxury spending. "Did you explicitly authorize those purchases?" he asked. "No," I said. "I said household expenses only." "Do you have that in writing?" "No. Verbal. Family arrangement." He nodded. "That makes civil fraud harder to prove, but not impossible. The real question is whether you want to pursue this legally or use it as leverage." "Leverage for what?" "A settlement," he said. "They agree to move out quietly, waive estate claims, and repay the charges. In exchange, you agree not to pursue further action." I considered that. "Could I actually file criminal charges?" "Possibly," he said. "Credit card fraud is a crime. But with family involvement and verbal permission, it becomes legally complicated. However," he leaned forward, "the threat alone is often more powerful than the charge. People will do a lot to keep fraud off their record." I absorbed that. This was not just about protection anymore. This was about leverage, control. "I want to restructure my entire estate," I said. "New trust, new beneficiaries, and I want the house protected." "I recommend a living trust," Daniel said. "You retain full control. It avoids probate and is much harder to contest." "Perfect," I said. "How soon?" "I can have drafts ready by January 10th. With notarization, 2 weeks total." "Do it." We spent the next hour working through details. When we finished, Daniel closed his folder and looked at me with something that resembled respect. "Most people cannot bring themselves to cut off their children," he said. "You seem very calm." "This is not anger," I replied. "It is clarity. My daughter made choices. She chose a manipulative husband over her father. She chose dishonesty over truth. Choices have consequences. And if she changes? Then we address it when it happens," I said. "Until then, I protect what I build." I left the office and drove through afternoon traffic. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Hale," a voice said. "This is Lucas Turner." "I have preliminary findings. Are you somewhere private?" "I am sitting in my truck," I said. "Go ahead." "Your son-in-law carries approximately $27,000 in credit card debt across 4 accounts," Lucas said. "He also has a car loan on a 2023 Lexus, balance around $5,500. Combined monthly debt payments are roughly $1,200. Kyle's salary was probably around $75,000 a year. After taxes and debt service, they had to be bleeding money every month. He missed 2 payments in November," Lucas continued. "Accounts are current now, but barely. Employment history shows 6 years at the dealership. Average performance. No significant promotions beyond cost of living increases." "Anything else?" I asked. "He has been browsing real estate listings," Lucas said. $500,000 to $600,000 range. Started in October. Higher-end neighborhoods." "My neighborhood," I said flatly. "Either planning to buy," Lucas replied, "or planning to inherit and trade up." I ended the call and sat there, staring at my house. Every brick paid for with decades of hard work. And in their minds, It was already converted into their future nest egg. I remembered the look on Kyle's face when I tore those trust documents. The shock, the fear, but underneath it all, rage. The rage of a man who believed the money was already his. That was when it finally clicked. They were not just waiting for me to die someday. They were planning around it, budgeting for it, building a life that only functioned if I was no longer part of it. I worked until midnight. Texas eviction procedures, living trust structures, property law, civil fraud statutes. I buried myself in research late into the night, page after page, line after line. Kyle and Emily thought they were waiting me out. They assumed time was on their side. They did not understand the most important shift that had happened inside me. I was no longer angry. I was deliberate, and that made me far more dangerous than rage ever could. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, I glanced out the window toward the garage. My Chevrolet sat exactly where I left it, quiet and patient. That car had taught me something important. Restoration was never about fixing what was broken. It was about removing everything that did not belong, cutting down to the core, and rebuilding correctly. Sometimes that meant cutting out rust, even when the rust looked like family. By the time Lucas Turner delivered his full report, I would know exactly how deep the damage went. By the time Daniel Price was finalized the new trust documents, I would be legally insulated, and by the time I finished what I had started, Kyle and Emily would finally understand what it meant to underestimate a man who built an empire from nothing. They wanted my money. They were welcome to try. But first, they would have to get through me, and I had spent 45 years fighting sharks. This time, I knew precisely which teeth to pull. January 15th arrived with Lucas's full report. I met him at a quiet coffee shop on Lamar Boulevard, far from familiar faces. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "It is all in there," he said evenly. "And Richard, it is worse than what I showed you earlier." I waited until I was back in my truck before opening it. 43 pages. Bank records. Recovered text messages. Email exchanges pulled from phone and account data. The pattern was unmistakable. Kyle had not been careless. He had been intentional, calculated. The $43,000 I had already discovered was only the surface. Lucas uncovered another $8,500 in cash advances and wire transfers I had missed. Total unauthorized use over 2 years came to $61,500. But it was the messages that made my blood turn cold. October 12th, sent to a contact saved as Kyle. "Old man cannot last much longer. House alone is worth $500,000, plus whatever cash he's sitting on." November 3rd, spoke to a realtor. "If we list at $520, we clear $480 after fees, enough to get us out of this hole." December 8th, 2 weeks before Christmas. "He is getting suspicious about the card. Might need to speed things up." Kyle's reply, "What are you saying?" Trent's response, "Nothing. Just saying nature takes its course. Sometimes it needs a little help." I read those words 3 times. Each time they felt colder than the last. My son-in-law was not just waiting for me to die. He was considering how to accelerate it. I drove straight to Daniel Price's office without calling ahead. His assistant tried to stop me, but one look at my face and she stepped aside. "Richard?" Daniel looked up from his desk. "What is wrong?" I dropped the report in front of him. "Page 32. He read it. In less than half a minute, his expression shifted from curiosity to concern to professional fury. "This is A threat, I said calmly. Vague enough to deny, clear enough to matter. Daniel leaned back. We need to move fast. If he is this desperate, he could do something reckless. I am already moving, I replied. I pulled out my phone and showed him the notes I had written at 1 a.m. Irrevocable living trust, charitable beneficiary, immediate transfer. I want it completed this week. That is aggressive, he said carefully. So is planning your father-in-law's death, I replied. We spent the next 3 hours mapping every detail. Daniel called in. Mary Ann Lewis, a notary he trusted, late 50s, sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who had seen every estate planning maneuver imaginable. Mr. Hale wants to establish an irrevocable living trust, Daniel explained. Complete transfer of assets. Charitable beneficiary. Mary Ann nodded. Texas law supports this structure well, but you understand what irrevocable means? Once signed, there is no going back. I understand completely, I said. She began laying out forms. Let us inventory the assets. I went through everything carefully. Sale of Hale Automotive Services in 2022, $8 million gross. After taxes, reinvestment, and operating costs, $520,000 in liquid assets and bonds. The house at Willowcrest Lane, current appraisal, $480,000, owned free and clear. Investment accounts totaling $220,000, offset by living expenses over 3 years. Total estate value, approximately $2,100,000. And you want all of this placed into a charitable trust? Mary Ann asked. Yes, I said. The Hale Automotive Education Fund, scholarships for young mechanics. $25,000 per recipient each year, enough for trade school, tools, and first-year expenses. I watched Daniel calculate silently. At a modest return, the fund could support 15 students annually, forever. That is remarkable, Mary Ann said quietly. And your daughter? She asked gently. She made her choice when she married a man who views my death as a business opportunity. Mary Ann did not argue. She simply nodded and continued drafting. The legal fees totaled $4,800, worth every cent. We finalized everything on January 22nd. I signed the documents in Mary Ann's office on Guadalupe Street, her notary seal locking it all into place. Everything I had built over 45 years, every dollar, every asset, every safeguard, was now beyond Kyle's reach. Impossible to contest. Impossible to manipulate. There is one more thing, Daniel said quietly as we finished. The unauthorized credit card usage, Daniel Pricetard said, tapping the file Lucas had prepared. This report gives us everything we need to file a civil action. File it, I said without hesitation. Daniel studied me for a moment. Richard, this will permanently destroy whatever relationship you have left with your daughter. Daniel, I replied evenly, my daughter's husband was discussing whether to help nature along with my death. That relationship is already gone. I am simply putting it in writing. He nodded once. Understood. I will have the complaint filed by the end of the week. Defendant, Kyle Mercer. Amount, $43,000 in unauthorized charges, plus interest, plus attorney's fees. Service scheduled for mid-February. I drove home as the sun dipped low over Austin, the sky burning orange and purple. When I arrived, the house was dark. Kyle and Emily were not home, probably out at some restaurant they could not afford, charging meals I would eventually be blamed for. I went straight to the garage, The Chevrolet was nearly finished. The paint gleamed. The chrome shone. The interior looked factory new. Only the final engine work remained. I ran my hand slowly across the hood. Smooth, solid, ready. Inside the house, I pulled a small digital recorder from its box. I had bought it at an electronics store for $89. Voice activated. 12 hours of storage. I placed one in the kitchen, tucked carefully behind the cookie jar Emily never touched. Another went into the living room, hidden behind a picture frame. Insurance, evidence, protection. I was not just defending myself anymore. I was preparing for every fight ahead. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The trap was set. The machinery was in motion. All I had to do now was wait for them to step into it. Kyle believed he was waiting me out. He believed time favored him. He had no idea that with every passing day I was building walls he could not climb, digging moats he could not cross, and shaping a battlefield where he had already lost. The trust was ironclad. The evidence was documented. The lawsuit was ready. And I was only getting started. The process server found Kyle on February 12th at the Toyota dealership. I was parked across the street, watching. I had driven down South Interstate 35 specifically for this moment. Call it petty. I called it the best entertainment I had had in months. The server walked into the showroom, a young man with a clipboard and an official air. He approached Kyle, who was standing with a couple looking at a Camry. I watched Kyle's face as the interruption registered. First annoyance, then confusion as the envelope was handed to him, then absolute shock as he skimmed the document. Even from across the street, I could see the color drain from his face. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, like a fish pulled from water. His hands began to shake. The couple shifted uncomfortably. The server pointed to a section on the page. Kyle's head snapped up, his eyes darting around the showroom like he was searching for an exit. I smiled. This was better than television. Kyle's sales manager appeared moments later. Kyle tried to wave him away, but the manager insisted on seeing the paperwork. His expression changed quickly, from concern to disbelief to professional distance. Kyle was escorted toward an office. The couple left without buying anything. I started my truck and drove home, humming to myself. The call came 2 hours later. "Dad," Emily cried, her voice breaking, "what did you do?" "Kyle was served," I said calmly. $43,000. "This is insane," she sobbed. "Is it?" I replied. "My credit card statements say otherwise." "Those were household expenses," she insisted weakly. "You had permission for groceries and utilities," I said. "Not cable packages, not poker losses in Louisiana." Silence. Then, "We will pay you back." "That is what the lawsuit is for." "This will ruin us," she said. "Can we not work this out?" "When was the last time Kyle treated me like family?" I asked. "Before or after he told someone my death might need to be sped up?" A longer silence followed. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "Ask your husband about his text messages," I said. "Ask him what he meant by helping nature along." I hung up. They arrived 30 minutes later. Kyle's face was flushed, his jaw locked tight. Emily looked hollowed out, like something inside her had collapsed. I opened the door. Inside. They followed me into the living room. I gestured toward the couch. They sat. I stayed standing. Kyle opened his mouth. "Richard, this is—" "Shut up," I said calmly. His mouth snapped closed. "I will speak," I continued. "You will listen." I set a folder on the coffee table and opened it. Credit card statements, Lucas's report, printed transcripts of the text messages. I watched Kyle's face cycle through denial, recognition, and panic. $43,000, I said. That is what I initially caught. The real number is $61,500. It was not theft, Kyle croaked. You gave us access. For household expenses, I replied, not to fund your lifestyle while you waited for me to die so you could sell my house. Emily gasped. Dad, we were not. I picked up the printed messages and read them aloud. Every word. Kyle's question. Trent's response about helping nature along. I watched my daughter's face as understanding settled in. Her eyes moved to Kyle, searching desperately for denial. He could not meet her gaze. Here is what happens next, I said evenly. The lawsuit proceeds unless you agree, in writing, notarized, to repayment of $43,000 plus $6,000 in legal fees. Total $49,200. We cannot afford that, Kyle said weakly. Then you should not have stolen it. I placed another document on the table. As of today, you have zero access to my accounts. Everything is locked. Kyle's hand trembled as he reached toward the papers. You cannot do this, he said without conviction. I already have. I turned to Emily. I have restructured my estate. There is no inheritance. Everything goes to charity when I die. Her face crumpled. Daddy, please. Do not, I said quietly. You stood there while he humiliated me. You knew about the charges, and you said nothing. You chose him, I said calmly. These are the consequences. Kyle shot to his feet, knocking papers onto the floor. This is revenge, he snapped. You are just a bitter old man. Sit down, I said quietly. He did. You are right, I continued evenly. This is revenge. But it is calculated, it is documented, it is legal, and it is only the beginning. I walked to the front door and pulled it open. You have 48 hours to sign the repayment agreement. If you do not, we go to court. Either way, you pay every cent. Now get out. They left without another word. Emily was sobbing openly. Kyle's face had gone a sickly gray. I closed the door behind them and stood there, listening as their car backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. Then I went to the garage, climbed into my Chevrolet, and laughed. Not cruel laughter, satisfied laughter. I replayed the look on Kyle's face as he read those text messages, the way his hands trembled, the moment Emily's eyes widened as she realized what her husband had been planning all along. Justice was not an abstract idea anymore. It was Kyle Mercer's face draining of color as he finally understood that the broke old man had outplayed him. I sent Daniel a message. They've been served. Now we wait. His reply came quickly. Let me know if they sign. If not, we proceed to court. I looked around my garage, at my tools, at my Chevrolet, at the life I had built piece by piece. They thought I was weak. They thought I was their shortcut to easy money. Now they knew better. And this was only the opening move. I still had the eviction notice prepared. I still had steps ahead they could not see coming. Kyle had once wondered how much longer the old man would last. As it turned out, a lot longer than him. I whistled as I went inside to make dinner. For the first time in months, I actually felt hungry. Revenge, it turned out, had a very satisfying flavor. March 1st arrived with clear skies and a sharp sense of purpose. I had scheduled the eviction notice to be served at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. From the window of my study, I watched the process server approach the house. The same young man who had served Kyle at the dealership. He was getting efficient. Kyle opened the door in his work clothes, coffee mug in hand. I saw his expression change the instant he recognized the server. The mug nearly slipped as he accepted the envelope. He turned sharply and stormed back inside, calling for Emily. I waited 30 minutes before going downstairs. They were seated at the kitchen table when I entered. The eviction notice spread between them like a death sentence. 30 days, Kyle said when he noticed me. His voice shook. You are giving us 30 days to leave? That is what the notice says. This is our home, Emily said, her eyes red and swollen. Dad, you cannot throw us out. This is my home, I replied calmly. You have lived here rent-free for 3 years. Under Texas law, I am entitled to terminate that arrangement with proper notice. We will fight this, Kyle said, standing. You cannot evict family without cause. Actually, I can, I said. You might want to look up Section 24.02 of the Texas Property Code. But if you insist on cause, we can always discuss the $61,000 in theft. Kyle's jaw clenched. We will get a lawyer. Please do, I said. That should run you about $1,200. Money well spent, I'm sure. I walked away before they could respond. That afternoon, Kyle hired Douglas Miller, a bargain attorney whose advertisements I had seen on bus benches. Cost $200. Daniel called me 3 days later, laughing openly. Miller filed a motion to dismiss, he said, claims they have established tenancy rights. And it is nonsense. No lease, no rent, no financial contribution. Judge Evan Thompson will toss it. Hearing is set for March 15th. The Ides of March. Fitting. The 2 weeks leading up to the hearing were tense. Kyle and Emily barely spoke to me. I spent the time finishing my Chevrolet. The engine was finally complete, every cylinder firing clean and strong. I took it out for test drives, letting the roar of the engine echo down the street. Kyle and Emily heard every one of them. The hearing itself took place downtown in a modest courtroom. No drama, just efficiency. Judge Thompson, a man in his 60s with reading glasses hanging from a chain, reviewed the filings for 3 minutes. Mr. Miller, he said, your clients claim tenancy rights? Yes, Your Honor. They have resided at the property continuously for 3 years. Did they pay rent? Well, no, but was there a written lease? No, Your Honor, but did they contribute to property taxes, insurance, or maintenance? Miller hesitated. Not formally, but then they are not tenants, the judge said flatly. They are guests who have overstayed their welcome. He turned to Daniel. Your Honor, Daniel said, the homeowner provided temporary accommodations. That arrangement has been terminated. Motion to dismiss denied, Judge Thompson ruled. Eviction notice stands. Defendants have until April 1st to vacate. 45 minutes total, including waiting. As we exited the courtroom, I looked at Kyle. His face had that same grayish tone again. You did this on purpose, he muttered. You planned all of it. Of course I did, I replied. You do not build multiple businesses by being stupid. You are destroying us. No, Kyle, I said calmly. I am stopping you from destroying me. Emily grabbed my arm. Daddy, please, where are we supposed to go? I looked at my daughter. She was 35 years old, 7 years without working, 3 years living in my house, while her husband discussed my death like a financial forecast. That is not my problem anymore, Emily, I said. You made your choices. Now You live with them. The next 2 weeks felt surreal. They moved through the house like shadows, packing boxes, avoiding eye contact. I helped with nothing. On March 30th, Kyle rented a moving truck. They had found an apartment off Runberg Lane in North Austin. Rent was $1,650 a month. First month and security deposit totaled $3,300 up front. They had borrowed from Emily's remaining savings, money she once called her inheritance. April 1st arrived, moving day. I stayed in the garage, working on the Chevrolet as they loaded the truck. I heard furniture scraping, Kyle swearing under his breath, Emily crying softly. Around 3 in the afternoon, Kyle appeared in the garage doorway. "We are done," he said stiffly. "Keys?" He tossed them toward me. I caught them without looking up. "You are proud of yourself," Kyle said bitterly, standing there, watching us fall apart. I set my wrench down slowly and looked at him. "I am not proud," I said evenly. "I am satisfied. You called me a broke old man who did not deserve respect. You spent $61,000 of my money. You discussed helping nature along with my death. And you honestly believed I would just absorb it." I stood up and faced him fully. "I am not suffering watching you leave, Kyle. I am relieved. This feels like cutting a cancer out before it spreads any further." For a moment, it looked like he might swing at me. His jaw clenched, his fists balled. Then he turned sharply and walked away without another word. 5 minutes later, I heard the moving truck start and pull away from the curb. I walked through my house afterward. Empty rooms, quiet hallways, clean counters. Everything felt lighter. Mine again. I poured myself a bourbon and called Daniel. "They're out," I said. "Good," he replied. "How do you feel?" "Like I just took 40 years of trash to the curb." He laughed softly. "One more thing. You asked me to mention the lawsuit details to Mark Reynolds." "Are you sure?" Mark Reynolds owned the Toyota dealership. He was also Daniel's client. "I am sure," I said. "Purely factual conversation, of course." "Of course," Daniel said. "I will schedule a meeting next week." I hung up and smiled. The eviction had only been Move 2. Move 3 was already underway. May arrived with thunderstorms and consequences. I was in the garage polishing the chrome trim on the Chevrolet when Daniel called. "It is done," he said. "Kyle is out at the dealership." I set the cloth down. "How?" "I met with Mark yesterday regarding his own estate updates," Daniel explained. "I mentioned, purely in passing, that I was handling an interesting civil fraud case. A son-in-law who had stolen $61,000 from his father-in-law using credit cards." "And?" Mark asked if the matter was public record. I told him it would be soon. Court filings are public. I already knew the rest. Mark connected the dots, Daniel continued. He called Human Resources this morning. They found cause under operational restructuring. Kyle was terminated at 10 o'clock that morning. I expected triumph. Instead, all I felt was fatigue. This was necessary, but it was not pleasant. "How much severance?" I asked. 2 weeks, Daniel said. "Standard." 2 weeks of pay, maybe $2,500 after taxes. And now, no job. I ended the call and went back to the Chevrolet, but the satisfaction had drained away. What remained was cold inevitability. 3 hours later, my phone rang. Emily. She was hysterical. "What did you do?" she cried. "Kyle lost his job. They said restructuring, but he knows it was you. How are we supposed to pay the settlement now? How are we supposed to live?" "You had an agreement," I said calmly. "You have taken everything," she sobbed. "The house, His job, our future. When does this stop? When the debt is paid, I replied. $49,200. That was the agreement. We cannot pay that without his job, she said desperately. Then he should have considered that before stealing from me. She was crying uncontrollably now. We have nothing. Nothing. You are already behind, I said. Daniel will file for wage garnishment. When Kyle finds new employment, 25% of his wages will be withheld until the judgment is satisfied. You are destroying us, she screamed. No, I replied. I am collecting a debt. There is a difference. She hung up. I stood there holding the phone, feeling something crack inside my chest. Not guilt, not regret. Just the weight of everything that had been set in motion. But I did not stop. 2 weeks later, Emily found work as a cashier at an H-E-B grocery store. Starting wage, $14.50 an hour, 32 hours a week, not full-time, no benefits. Her take-home pay came out to roughly $1,600 a month. Their apartment rent was $1,650. The math never worked. I knew that. That was the point. In June, they missed their third payment under the settlement agreement. Daniel filed a motion for accelerated payment terms. That was when Kyle tried to fight back. He hired Miller again, another $800 he did not have, and filed a countersuit. He claimed I had defamed him to his employer, causing wrongful termination. He claimed emotional distress. He demanded $75,000 in damages. Daniel called me laughing so hard he had to pause. He is suing you for defamation, he said between breaths. I never mentioned his name, I replied. Not once. I know, Daniel said. You described a case. Mark drew his own conclusions. And emotional distress? I asked. He threatened your life in writing, Daniel said dryly. What do you want to do? Dismiss it. It is frivolous, he agreed. It will cost Kyle another $1,000 in court fees when it fails. Miller is probably billing hourly now. The hearing took place in July. Different judge. Judge Elena Martinez. Younger, sharp. She read Miller's filing, then Daniel's response. Then she looked directly at Kyle with something close to pity. Mr. Mercer, she said, do you have evidence that Mr. Price mentioned your name to Mr. Reynolds? Well, no, Kyle said, sweating, but the timing. Circumstantial, she interrupted. Do you have evidence that Mr. Hale instructed his attorney to defame you? It is obvious that evidence, Mr. Mercer, she said firmly, not speculation. Kyle had nothing. Miller shuffled papers, found nothing, said nothing. Motion to dismiss granted, Judge Martinez ruled. Legal costs awarded to the defendant. Mr. Mercer, you owe Mr. Hale an additional $2,400 in attorney fees. File frivolous actions again, and I will consider sanctions. Kyle stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. His face flushed red, then white, then red again. This is rigged, he shouted. You are all protecting him because he has money and connections. We have nothing, and you are bleeding us dry. Mr. Mercer, the judge warned, sit down or I will hold you in contempt. He did not sit. My father-in-law is a vindictive old bastard, he yelled. It took 2 court officers to escort him out of the courtroom. I watched Kyle being led out of the courtroom, his shoulders stiff, his jaw locked. Miller hurried after him, already flustered, probably calculating how to bill for the disaster he had just witnessed. Daniel placed a hand lightly on my arm. You all right? Yeah, I said honestly. Just exhausted. He is desperate, Daniel added, and desperate people do stupid things. I know, I replied. We stepped out of the courthouse into the heavy July heat. I drove home with Kyle's face stuck in my mind. He was not scared anymore. He was furious, cornered. That worried me more than panic ever could. That night, my alarm company called. Motion detected at my house. I opened the security feed on my phone. Kyle stood in my driveway staring up at my windows, unmoving. I called the police immediately, gave them my address, and explained the situation. It was a clear violation of the restraining order I had filed after his courtroom outburst. 2 patrol cars arrived within 10 minutes. I watched on my screen as officers approached him, spoke with him, checked his identification. He left without incident, but the message was unmistakable. He was not done. Neither was I. I double-checked every lock, reset the alarms, and went out to the garage. My Chevrolet sat under the lights, fully restored now. The paint was flawless. The chrome gleamed. The engine purred like it had just rolled off the factory line. I had taken something broken and made it whole again. Now I just had to finish dealing with the rust. I texted Daniel. He showed up at my house tonight. Police came. A moment later, his reply appeared. Escalate the wage garnishment. I want payment starting the day he finds new work. His response came quickly, already in motion. And Richard, be careful. He is unraveling. I looked again at the security footage of Kyle standing in my driveway, fists clenched. Yes, he was unraveling, but I had prepared for that too. I retrieved the recordings from the digital recorders I had hidden weeks earlier, hours of conversations. Kyle and Emily talking, planning, rationalizing, scheming, insurance against whatever came next. The game was not over, but I was still 3 moves ahead. August arrived with a decision I had been planning since March. I sat in Daniel's office, signing the final paperwork for the sale of the house. The buyer was the Austin Youth Development Center, a nonprofit that worked with at-risk teenagers. They planned to convert 2914 Willowcrest Lane into a community center, tutoring, mentoring, life skills programs. Sale price, $465,000. Below market value. That was intentional. The tax deduction alone justified it, and the symbolism mattered. They are thrilled, Daniel said, reviewing the contract. This location is perfect for what they do. You are doing something meaningful here. I am doing the right thing, I said. That is different. I signed the final page. The house where I raised Emily. The house where my wife died. The house where I was humiliated at Christmas dinner. It was no longer mine, and it felt like shedding old skin. I had already leased a new apartment. Modern building near downtown, 15th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lady Bird Lake. 2 bedrooms, open layout, secure garage space for the Chevrolet, rent $2,100 a month, easily manageable. The movers came on August 15th. I took very little. Furniture I actually liked, my tools, personal items. Everything else went to donation. That house held too many memories, too much weight. I spent my last night there in the garage with my Chevrolet. The car was finished now. Deep cherry red paint, flawless chrome, restored leather interior. I rebuilt the engine myself and tuned it until it ran perfectly. That car had been my therapy, my meditation, proof that broken things could be made beautiful again. I ran my hand along the hood one last time, then drove it to my new place and closed the door on that chapter of my life. 3 days later, my phone rang. Emily. Dad? She said quietly. Can we talk? In person? Something in her voice had changed. It sounded stripped down. Real. Where? I asked. Your new place, she said. I need to see you. I gave her the address. She arrived an hour later. I barely recognized her. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by an HEB uniform, red polo, khaki pants. Her hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. No makeup. She looked exhausted. She looked 35, going on 50. She looked for the first time in years like my daughter. Come in, I said. She stood in the living room, taking in the minimal furniture, the clean lines, the view of the water, the life I had built without them. You sold the house, she said. It was not a question. Yes. To a nonprofit? Yes. Her face crumpled. That was our home. No, Emily, I said gently. That was my home. You just lived there. She nodded slowly, tears forming. I know that now. She sat on the couch and, for the first time in months, truly cried. Not performative tears, not manipulation, just raw, honest grief. I am so sorry, Dad, she said through sobs, for everything, for letting Kyle, for not standing up for you, for being part of it. I was so stupid. I sat across from her and waited. I thought, she continued, I thought we deserved it, your money, the house, like you owed us because we were family. Kyle kept saying you had more than you needed, that you would want to help us, that it was not really stealing because it would all be ours someday anyway. And you believed him? I asked quietly. I wanted to, she said. It was easier than admitting what we were doing, easier than admitting who he really was. She looked up at me, eyes red and hollow. I read the text messages about helping nature along, Emily said quietly. I confronted him. He claimed it was just talk, just frustration. But, Dad, I think he meant it. I think he would have. She could not finish the sentence. I know, I said softly. I left him, she continued after a moment. 2 weeks ago. I am staying with a friend from work. I filed for divorce yesterday. Something shifted inside my chest. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it felt like the first crack in a wall that had been solid for a long time. Good, I said. I know it does not fix anything, she went on. The debt, the consequences, everything I did, it is all still there. But I need you to know I am sorry, truly sorry, and I understand if you cannot forgive me. I looked at my daughter. I saw the little girl who used to pass me wrenches in the garage. I saw the woman who had made selfish, damaging choices. And I saw someone who might finally be learning what accountability actually meant. I forgive you, Emily, I said. Her breath caught sharply. But forgiveness does not erase consequences, I continued. You chose Kyle. You chose to lie. You chose to steal. You chose to stay silent while he humiliated me. Those choices produced real results. The debt remains. The trust remains. The house is sold. None of that changes. I know, she whispered. You made your bed, I said gently. Now you have to lie in it and learn from it. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I am learning, she said. I am working. I am paying my own bills. It is hard, but it is real. For the first time in years, I am not depending on someone else to carry me. Good, I replied. Keep going. She stood to leave, then hesitated near the door. Dad, do you think someday we could have a relationship again? Not like before, just something? I thought carefully before answering. Maybe, I said honestly, if you keep making different choices, if you prove you have changed. But that takes time, Emily, a lot of time. I understand. She gave me a small, sad smile. I love you, Dad. I love you too, I said. But love and trust are not the same thing. You will have to earn the second one back." She nodded and left. I stood by the window afterward, watching the sun sink over Austin, feeling lighter than I had in months. I had lost my daughter for a while. Maybe I would get her back someday. Maybe not. Either way, I had found myself again, and that was enough. October 12th, 2025. Final hearing on the debt collection. I arrived at the courthouse early, Daniel beside me. We had walked these halls so many times they felt familiar, almost routine. But this was different. This was the end. Kyle and Emily arrived separately. Emily came with her divorce attorney. Kyle came with Miller, who looked exhausted and miserable. They sat on opposite sides of the courtroom. Emily caught my eye and gave a small nod. Kyle stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Judge Martinez presided again. She recognized Kyle immediately. "Mr. Price," she said, "present your case." Daniel stood. Settlement agreement executed in February. Total obligation, $49,200. Payments made, $4,250. Remaining balance, $44,950, less $6,600 garnished from Ms. Hale's wages. Current balance owed by Mr. Mercer, $38,350. He continued calmly. "Mr. Mercer has been unemployed since May. He has made no meaningful effort to secure work. He continues to drive a 2023 Lexus valued at approximately $31,000. We request the vehicle be seized and sold to satisfy the debt." Miller stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Mercer needs that vehicle." "He has had 5 months to find employment," Daniel replied. "Public transportation in Austin is adequate." Judge Martinez looked directly at Kyle. "Mr. Mercer, have you actively sought employment?" Kyle stood slowly. "I have been dealing with personal issues." "The divorce? Stress?" she asked flatly. "That is not an answer. Have you submitted job applications?" Silence. "Mr. Mercer?" "A few," he muttered. "How many?" 10, maybe 12. "In 5 months," she said evenly. "Motion granted. The Lexus will be seized and sold. Proceeds applied to the judgment. Remaining balance subject to ongoing wage garnishment. Mr. Mercer will secure employment within 30 days or face contempt." Kyle's face went pale. "You cannot—" "I can," she interrupted, "and I have. Next case?" We exited into the hallway. Kyle was visibly shaking. I walked past without speaking, but he was not finished. "This is your fault," he snapped, turning on me. "You destroyed my life. You took everything." I stopped and turned slowly. "No, Kyle," I said calmly. "You destroyed your own life. I simply stopped letting you destroy mine." "You planned all of this," he spat. "I planned it from the moment you called me a broke old man in my own house." His face twisted. $1 million, he hissed. "That is what you took from us." That was when I smiled. "Kyle," I said quietly, "let me tell you something. That trust document I tore up on Christmas Eve, the one for $1 million, he froze. "That was only part of my estate," I continued. "In January, I created a new trust, the Hale Automotive Education Fund. Total value, $2.3 million. I watched the color drain from his face, watched his eyes widen, watched his mouth open and close without sound. $1.8 million from my business sale," I said. $465,000 from the house. $220,000 in investments. Everything I built over 45 years. You gave it all away?" he whispered. "Every dollar," I said. "Scholarships for young mechanics. 15 students a year. $25,000 each. Kids who actually want to work, build something, and earn their future. Kyle's knees buckled. Miller caught him. That money was supposed to be ours, Kyle said hoarsely. You were supposed to show me respect, I replied. Instead, you mocked me, stole from me, and discussed my death like a financial strategy. I stepped closer. So yes, I said quietly, that money could have been yours. Every single penny. I met his eyes. But you chose to humiliate me instead. You chose to steal from me, I continued calmly. You chose to talk about helping nature along. And now that $2.3 million will change the lives of people who will never know your name. People who will never know what you could have had if you had chosen decency instead. Kyle's face turned the same dull gray it had been on Christmas night. 10 months of planning, 10 months of patience, and everything circled back to this exact moment. You are going to die alone, he spat, his voice cracking, a bitter old man. You are wrong, I replied evenly. My legacy is 15 mechanics every year, learning a real trade, building honest lives. That is more family than you ever were. I turned to leave. Richard? Emily's voice stopped me. She stood a few steps away, divorce papers tucked under her arm. She looked tired, thinner somehow, but steadier. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? I asked. For not giving up on me, she said. For forgiving me, even when I did not deserve it. I nodded once. You're welcome. Now go build a real life. She nodded back and walked away from Kyle, in the opposite direction. Daniel and I left the courthouse together. The October air was crisp and clear, the kind that feels like a clean break. How do you feel? He asked as we reached the steps. Satisfied, I said. Complete. Ready to move on. And what comes next? I am thinking about volunteering, I said. Maybe mentoring some of those scholarship kids, teaching them business basics, integrity, the things that actually matter. He laughed. I think you would be very good at that. I drove home in my Chevrolet, the engine running smooth and steady, the deep red paint catching the afternoon sun. 10 months of restoration, mechanical and personal, finally complete. My phone buzzed at a stoplight, a message from Cynthia Harris. First scholarship awarded yesterday, 18-year-old from Houston, single mother working 2 jobs, wants to study diesel mechanics. Thought you would want to know. I smiled. That evening, I took the Chevrolet out for a long drive, leaving Austin behind and heading into the hill country. The windows were down. Classic rock played on the radio. The rebuilt engine purred perfectly beneath me. The sunset painted the sky in red and gold. Quiet, wide, peaceful. I thought about the look on Kyle's face when I told him about the $2.3 million. The devastation, the sudden understanding of everything he had lost because of his own choices. I thought about Emily starting over, learning, growing into someone stronger than she had been. And I thought about the 15 kids every year who would get a real chance because I decided revenge alone was not enough. Justice had to create something better. The road stretched ahead, open and empty. I pressed the accelerator. The Chevrolet responded like a dream, and I laughed. Free, grounded, whole. Justice had not just been served. It had been earned.